From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
There are some severe human rights violations going on, and they are being perpetrated by China. So I am here to make sure that my voice is heard, that I am not okay with human rights violations.
Thousands turn out in San Francisco to protest the Olympic torch relay and this year's Beijing Games. We'll speak with Human Rights Watch. Then, why is the Justice Department put off prosecuting more than 50 companies accused of wrongdoing over the last 3 years? We'll talk to the editor of the Corporate Crime Reporter. A new report on racial income inequality is out, called 40 Years Later, The Unrealized Dream. But first, we'll be joined by a telecom whistleblower who stumbled on the Quantico circuit that allowed unfettered access to all systems on a carrier's network. That could mean your phone calls, your email, your text messages. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. ABC News is reporting senior Bush administration officials personally discussed and approved how top al-Qaeda suspects would be interrogated by the CIA. The group agreed on controversial interrogation techniques, including physical assault, sleep deprivation, and waterboarding. The officials were all members of the Principals Committee on the National Security Council. They included Vice President Cheney, former National Security Advisor Rice, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, and Secretary of State Powell, as well as CIA Director George Tenet and Attorney General John Ashcroft. It's the first time senior White House officials have been linked to an explicit group authorization of the CIA interrogation program. One top official recounted Ashcroft was the lone cabinet member to raise doubts. The official quoted Ashcroft as saying, quote, "Why are we talking about this in the White House? History will not judge this kindly," he said. In the summer of 2004, amidst the controversy over the Abu Ghraib photos and the withdrawal of a controversial memo approving harsh interrogations, the Principals Committee again approved new techniques on a CIA prisoner captured in Asia. Condoleezza Rice is said to have provided decisive support, reportedly telling CIA officials, quote, "This is your baby, go do it." In Iraq, at least 4 people have been killed, another 6 wounded in the latest U.S. attacks on Baghdad's Shia stronghold of Sadr city. The dead included 3 members of a family eating breakfast when a U.S. mortar round hit their home. Close to 70 people have been killed in Sadr city clashes between Shia fighters and U.S. Iraqi forces since Sunday. Much of Baghdad was under curfew Wednesday as Iraqis quietly marked the 5th anniversary of the fall of Saddam Hussein to U.S. troops.
The curfew will have a bad effect on people. In the curfew, we cannot go outside to buy food. We cannot use our cars, and we cannot take patients to the hospital. So it has a very bad effect on people. It will also have a bad effect on those who have jobs.
The curfew was imposed ahead of a planned anti-occupation march by supporters of Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. The march was called off amidst fears of violence against demonstrators. A Baghdad resident said 5 years after U.S. occupation, life in Iraq is no better than under Saddam Hussein.
5 years after the fall of Saddam, nothing has changed. The situation is the same suffering. We were living in darkness, and now we are living in more darkness. The situation is not good. No services, no gasoline, nothing.
In other Iraq news, an Iraqi judicial committee has called for the release of the imprisoned Associated Press photographer Bilal Hussein from a U.S. military jail. Hussein has been jailed without charge for nearly 2 years. This week, a 4-judge panel ruled Hussein falls under an amnesty law and should be released without delay. The U.S. military has not responded to the order. The U.S. has also detained without charge the Al Jazeera cameraman Sami al-Hajj, held at Guantanamo Bay for more than 5 years. On Capitol Hill, Democrats say they plan to indefinitely delay a vote on a controversial trade agreement with Colombia. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said lawmakers need more time to consider the deal.
We would hope that some of those initiatives would be acceptable to the president, funded and signed into law, and then we can consider the merits of and only then could we consider the merits of a Colombia Free Trade Agreement. We have concerns about job loss in our country. We have concerns about the treatment of workers and their organizers in Colombia. but we stand ready to have those conversations as long as the president wants to put American workers and their families first.
The Bush administration has been lobbying feverishly for the trade deal. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said a delay would undermine U.S. standing in Latin America.
This strong friend of America who has done all the right things to try to bring his country to stability, democracy, and prosperity, and has done so as an avowed friend of America, fighting terrorists on one side, trying to demobilize paramilitaries on another, and standing strong against very hostile anti-American states and forces in Latin America. What will it say if the United States turns its back now on Colombia?
Labor unions and human rights groups have been pushing Congress to reject the treaty, in part because Colombia has the highest rate of killings of trade unionists in the world. According to Human Rights Watch, 17 trade unionists have been killed in Colombia in the first 3 months of this year. In Israel and the occupied territories, deadly raids killed civilians on both sides of the Gaza border Wednesday. 2 Israeli civilians were killed when Palestinian militants attacked a border crossing. Hours later, 2 Palestinian civilians, including a boy, died when Israeli tanks attacked a terminal in Gaza City. 3 militants also died in Israeli attacks. Palestinian Resistance Committee's spokesperson Abu Bilal said Palestinian attacks were aimed to break the Israeli siege of Gaza.
This heroic operation is one of the first emergency calls among a chain of operations that the resistance will execute to break the choking siege, lifting the suffering of the Palestinian people. And we assure that the anger of the resistance will target the Zionist enemy only, and we do not have an interest in targeting anyone else besides them.
Meanwhile, former President Jimmy Carter is planning on meeting Hamas's exiled political leader, Khalid Mashal, in Syria next week. Last week, Mashal reiterated his previous statement that Hamas would accept a Palestinian state along the 1967 borders with Israel. Carter's plans immediately came under criticism from all 3 leading presidential candidates. Senator John McCain called on Senator Barack Obama and Senator Hillary Clinton to condemn the meeting. In statements, both Clinton and Obama said they disagreed with Carter's plans. The meeting comes as Israeli public support is growing for talks with Hamas. A poll in February found 64% of Israelis support Hamas's call for a ceasefire. In Haiti, protests over the rising cost of food have entered their second week. On Wednesday, UN forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets on crowds outside the National Palace. Prices of staples, including rice, beans, and fruit, have increased 50% over the past year.
We can't live. A kilo of rice is selling at 30 Haitian dollars. We can't afford to feed our children.
At least 5 people have been killed and more than 40 wounded during a week of protests. The food price protests in Haiti are one of several to hit countries around the world in recent weeks. On Wednesday, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization warned the unrest could spread even further unless the international community intervenes to reverse the rising costs. Several factors have contributed, including droughts and a rising demand for biofuels, such as ethanol, which drives up food prices by making food crops more scarce.